This is an historic day for Canada and for our planet, for the economy, and for all Canadians for generations to come.
Let me be clear. Canada's Conservatives will repeal Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax. We will protect the environment and fight climate change, but we won't be doing that by making the poorest Canadians pay.
We are going to consult with Albertans and also talk to our allied provinces to determine the best way forward to protect jobs and the economy.
The Supreme Court's decision is very unfortunate today, but it is a reality that we must deal with.
Lots of reaction there to the Supreme Court's decision on Ottawa's carbon tax. Today, the top court, as we've been talking about, ruled it constitutional for the federal government to impose minimum carbon pricing standards on provinces, citing that climate change is a national concern. So where does this leave, for instance, the Conservative premiers who fought against it? It's Thursday, and I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good day to have you all here. Chantal, let me start with you. We did hear reaction from some of the premiers who challenged this today. What does this decision mean for their fight against the carbon tax or anyone who doesn't like the carbon tax?
Two things. For the premiers in the provinces that have declined to put in place provincial programs that would have brought carbon pricing to the level expected from the federal government, there is a choice here. They can keep fighting. That won't happen in the courts. That would happen politically, electorally. I'll come back to this. Or they can craft programs of their own, as Quebec or BC or even New Brunswick has done, cap and trade, carbon pricing through a carbon tax that meets the federal requirements. The other way to see this fight continuing is for them to try to relaunch as the Resistance 2.0, and again back the Conservative Party federally in the hope that Mr. O'Toole, who again today promised to scrap the carbon pricing mechanism, could or not become Prime Minister. But this battle can only be won in a federal election now, or with the provinces coming to different choices than the ones they made before they challenged the issue in court.
Okay. Andrew, your thoughts on where this leaves some of those people who were against a carbon price?
Well, as a legal matter, it's now a fait accompli. There's no other court they can appeal to. I thought the reaction from the premiers today, I don't think we heard from Doug Ford unless I'm mistaken, but from Scott Moe and Jason Kenney was pretty telling. They did not sound like they were revving up for another battle on this. They sounded like they were inclined to take this on board. And after all, they have a choice. They can either, the tax is going to be collected one way or another. Either they can collect it or the feds can collect it. And I think eventually the logic of that is going to come home to them. I thought Aaron O'Toole looked quite isolated today in claiming he was going to repeal it. I think if the premiers thought he was likely to win and likely to win on that platform, they might have rallied around him. They didn't, I think, tells you where they think he's going. But ultimately, in the long run, this might be to his benefit, which is to say, if this issue does go to bed, if the provinces come on side of it, if there therefore is no federal tax to scrap, then it becomes a non-issue and he can talk about other things. So in a way, this might actually liberate him in the long run.
Okay, Chantal has things to say about that, but first, Althea, just your thoughts on where that leaves some people.
Well, I mean, we saw Scott Moe late in the day suggest that Saskatchewan might bring in a plan similar to New Brunswick. So I don't think that they're revving up for the Conservative political parties provincially and federally line of attack against this. I think this is kind of the train's left the station. I think this decision is really significant for three reasons. First of all, the Supreme Court actually wrote the Chief Justice in the decision that climate change is real, that it is an existential threat to humanity, for the fact that it is not a finished dialogue within the Conservative membership, as we saw last week. Obviously, the Supreme Court justices were not responding to what happened at the Conservative convention, but the fact that the court has pronounced itself on this, I think, is quite significant. I think it's very significant that we didn't actually hear the Conservative leader I think there was a line of argument he could have used in the Supreme Court's decision, specifically in the dissenting decisions, saying that the majority had basically created this new power that would allow federal jurisdiction to intervene on things like possibly the administration of hospitals, that there could be a huge floodgate. We didn't hear Erin O'Toole say that, take the line that we'd heard from the government of Quebec as well in fighting this decision, that this was going to be something that was a risk to the Federation. And third, just politically, the fact that we had two dissenting judges, one appointed by Stephen Harper, one appointed by Justin Trudeau, really speaks to the fact that appointments matter. And I know that there were discussions about the conservative, mostly conservative nature of Justice Rowe when the Liberals decided to appoint him, but they were looking for a Francophone from Newfoundland, and there's not that many people that fit that bill. But here is an example that, we don't have the same debates as we do in the United States on things like abortion, but we do have decisions and debate about provincial jurisdictions and federal jurisdictions, and that tends to align on the same political viewpoints, conservatives, liberals. And this is another example that who you appoint to the court does matter.
Okay, Chantal, I think you wanted to talk about what this does for Erin O'Toole and whether this allows him some room if a carbon tax is just a thing that everyone decides to go ahead with.
It's not that simple. And there is a reason why the Supreme Court went out of its way to point out that this is not about a tax, but about a regulatory mechanism. And if you understand the federal legislation, it is a floor price on carbon that the federal government today was told it was allowed to set. That floor is the floor of an elevator. It is meant to go up. If it doesn't go up, it's inefficient. It's a symbolic gesture. So to say that if the provinces, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, put in place mechanism that kind of makes the carbon tax disappear, that's not accurate, because what was validated today was more than that. It was the capacity of the federal government to increase or raise that floor as it will need to be raised. Yes. So when Erin O'Toole is saying he's going to scrap the carbon tax, does he mean he's going to stop collecting it, or does he mean he's going to repeal the legislation? Because if that is what he means, it doesn't really matter that everyone has a carbon tax. We will be back to where we were before the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Right, yeah. But if you're Erin O'Toole and you know that this issue is a loser for you, and he knows that, and the people around him know that, then it seems to me the sensible and smart interpretation that he would impose on it is, I'm not going to collect a tax. That gives him a way to say that he's acquitted himself in terms of his base. He's paid homage to the diehards, but he doesn't actually have to change anything. So it doesn't take a lot of political ingenuity for him to say, we're not going to, the issue of the federal government collecting the carbon tax is what I meant. We're not going to do that anymore. And then just stop talking about it. At that point, he can talk about other things, which if he has a brain in his head, he would like to do.
All right, Chantal, and then I'll.
But if you have a federal government that is determined to never raise the level of the floor price on carbon, you have the equivalent of having scrapped the policy.
Right. Except, isn't the threat of raising the floor on the carbon tax what you could fight against as a conservative premier or a conservative leader?
But that's already But that is already programmed. The carbon tax is set to increase. That's part and parcel. Yeah. So you can want to fight about it, but I don't think farming it out to the provinces, franchising it, takes away from the debate. You either continue to increase it, or else you might as well throw out the legislation.
Okay, Althea.
I feel like I might be lost in this conversation. I don't think that this is what is facing Erin O'Toole is a decision about whether or not he's going to accept the floor. He's clearly said he is not going to have a price on carbon. But, we don't know when the next federal election is going to be, and maybe there will be no provinces that go along with what Erin O'Toole decides at that point. So there will be mechanisms in the provinces possibly that already meet the standards, and people will decide that it's a done deal. We don't know. It's clear that he's looking more at a regulatory approach. I don't get the sense that the Conservatives actually have nailed down their environmental plan completely. I think today, just proves to them that they have more work to do on that front.
Andrew, last point to you.
I think whether or not to raise the floor price over time is a decision that a Prime Minister O'Toole would love to face. Until then, he's been given the opportunity by this to stop talking about it. Until then, he has the opportunity to change the subject, but that's been given to by the Supreme Court and may be given to him, we'll see, by these until now recalcitrant provinces. If the provinces that are most affected by this basically accept it, I don't think you're going to see Aaron O'Toole out by himself saying, no, you guys don't understand, I'm still going to repeal it. If the business community is on side for it, including much of the oil patch is on side for it, I think he's going to look more and more isolated, and I think he knows that. I think he knows there's no percentage for him. I think he's looking for an avenue to get out of this discussion.
Quickly, Althea.
Well, it's only going to get, it's only going to get more intense for him to actually say something, because the federal government has announced that it is going to actually announce new, more ambitious targets. It plans to align its targets with more ambitious targets from the United States. So, I mean, the discussion about what the Conservative Party is going to do on the environment is not going away at all. If anything, the bar is being set higher and higher.
C'est rendu qu'on s'appelle François Justin.
That was Quebec's Premier François Legault talking about how he and the Prime Minister are now on this first name basis, and how he was happy to start his week yet again with Justin Trudeau. That's because the two leaders have had these two announcements in 2 weeks in person, something that was pretty rare and is certainly worth marking and talking about. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all back for another round of At Issue. Althea, why don't you start us off on this? They were asked about this this week, about why they were getting along so well. I mean, Justin Trudeau came bearing gifts of money, so that might be part of it. But what do you think is going on here?
I think it's mostly because governments have realized that they can actually accomplish more things that they both want to do together than fighting each other on these select things. They're still fighting about like healthcare transfers, but they can definitely get behind each other on supporting each other's promises. I mean, I don't think a surprise that the date by which, so these two announcements, I'm not sure how much detail there was in the introduction, but the announcement this week was about broadband internet, connecting tens of thousands of Canadian households to broadband. And the fact that the deadline is just a month before the provincial election, I think is very interesting and telling. So it's just governments realizing that they have more in common than in opposition. It is a realization that they're both actually quite popular. The Liberal Party is incredibly popular still in Quebec. But if I can just add a little asterisk, I find it strange that, 3 years after François Legault has come to power, now is the time that they're just starting to call each other on a first name basis. Like, doesn't that speak? Why were they not talking to each other on a first name basis before now?
I'm going to guess because it wasn't politically convenient, but I don't know. Chantal, tell us what you think.
Actually, this is about getting Premier Legault off the hook. In the sense that he'd been giving news conferences where he would routinely call the Prime Minister, Justin's doing this and that. So better to suddenly be on a first name basis than to look like you're just dismissing the Prime Minister by calling him by his first name.
Suddenly being disrespectful. Got it. Okay.
And since I'm mopping up on the cynical side of things, let me continue. It has something to do also with some interesting poll numbers. They're, I think, from Main Street, but they tell something. It's not called the Coalition, Avenir Québec, for no reason. What Main Street found was that amongst the people who support the CAQ, 31%, that's almost 1/3, vote for the federal Liberals. Mm-hmm. That's the largest group. And then you've got a quarter that vote for the Conservatives and a quarter that vote for the Bloc. So if you're Premier Legault and 1/3 of your supporters, Premier Ford has a bit of that problem, by the way, who like Justin Trudeau, maybe you should start not disliking him so much. Second point, I think slowly but surely the Quebec government is giving up on the prospect of a Conservative government in Ottawa anytime soon.
Okay, Andrew, your assessment of why they are getting along so well.
Well, There are two substances that tend to make social occasions more convivial, alcohol and money. In this case...
No, I'm not laughing because it's not true. It's very true. It's just very succinct of you. Yeah.
So, the Prime Minister is in possession of the majority, not majority, but a strong lead in the polls. He is got apparently unlimited sums of money to spill about. If you're François Legault, I know that both the Conservatives and the Bloc would like to be pals with Mr. Legault, but if he's got an incumbent Prime Minister who looks like he's going to get reelected, who's got lots of money to hand around, of course he's going to be friendly when the money's being handed out. Is this going to mean that they're suddenly going to dispense with their differences over, long-term care, and whether the federal government should have a role in that, or over how much the feds are going to distribute to the provinces for healthcare, which is a much more big-ticket item than the feds signed on for on these two occasions? I doubt it. But why wouldn't he smile and grip and grin for the cameras in this particular circumstance?
Okay, so then I wouldn't mind hearing you all on what this does. We've heard what Chantal think it means for the Conservatives, but what does it do for the Bloc? Because it does seem like all they talk about here is trying to obviously defend the interests of Quebec, but also align themselves with the CAQ. And it feels like François Legault is shutting them out a little bit. I don't know, Althea, and then Chantal. I'm not sure Chantal agrees with me, but go ahead.
More than I can, but the Bloc and the CAQ don't have the warmest relationship. And even though you get the sense that Bloc MPs really want to be seen as the voice of Quebec in the House of Commons and the real voice, the Premier has been, kind of suggesting he doesn't need the Bloc Québécois to give Quebecers that message. So there is overlap in some of the constituencies in terms of popular support, but I don't think the Bloc is going to limit its criticism of the Liberals just because the François Legault and Justin Trudeau have had two great press conferences where they seem very chummy and lots of money has been passed around on projects that they both wanted to get done.
No, I totally agree with you. But Chantal, does it change anything in terms of how the Bloc needs to think about its own opportunities in Quebec? If suddenly Legault is getting along so well with Justin Trudeau, what does that change for them?
I think the Bloc understands from the last campaign that the sense that Justin Trudeau will remain Prime Minister is actually good for the Bloc Québécois. In the last campaign, I can't tell you how many voters would stop me on the street and say, if I vote for the Bloc, am I helping Andrew Scheer to become Prime Minister? And that is an outcome that those voters wanted to avoid. So somewhere there's a zone of comfort, and it's not the first time. It has always been the history of the Bloc that it did very poorly when Stephen Harper was in power and Quebecers wanted to change governments, and did fairly well under Jean Chrétien and now under Justin Trudeau. So I think both François Legault and Quebec voters are relatively comfortable with the Bloc in a position of influence and Justin Trudeau, but not Erin O'Toole as Prime Minister.
Last word to you, Andrew, on that.
I agree with Chantal that both the Liberals and the Bloc have a mutual interest in polarization in Quebec, which is bad news for the Conservatives. So it's yet another not terribly good day for the Conservatives in that regard.
Yeah, you know who we didn't even mention there? The NDP, and I'm not sure what that says about any other. Yeah. Okay, your face is all set enough.
Not much in Quebec, sorry.
Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend. I appreciate it.